first thing I want to talk about here is Dianne Feinstein. Dianne Feinstein has died. She has gone on to the happy Senate hunting ground up there in the sky. At 90 years old, she has been a senator in from California for, I think, the majority of my lifetime. Even before I was born, I think. I mean, in the 70s, she's been in politics at least for 50 years. Why is this a big deal, right? Well, she died at 90 years old. And for the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years, she has had some very, very noticeable cognitive decline. Borderline dementia. Often forgetting things, repeating herself, forgetting people's names, forgetting where she is. It's gotten really bad over the last year. Staffers and things like that leading her around, telling her how to vote, that kind of thing. She's collapsed a couple of times. She's taken lots and lots of sick days. And, this kind of thing happens when you're 90 years old. I mean, the woman is 90. So you can't be working a 40-hour work week. The thing is that Congress people, specifically senators, they don't just clock out at 5 p.m. and go home. It's like, no, they're out there at night doing events on weekends, most of the time raising money for re-election or for the party. So let's keep that in mind. But also when it comes to things like, say, this very recent kerfluffle with the budget where we almost had a government shutdown again, stuff like that, where they've got to be there no matter how long it takes. They can be there up into the wee hours of the night sometimes, getting resolutions passed, that kind of thing. So it's not, being in the Senate, right? It's not a 9 to 5. It's not like you just have business hours and then you leave. They can work around the clock sometimes, especially when they're going for re-election. Campaigning is a 24-hour thing, and apparently is very exhausting. You got to have lots of energy. You're always on the road. You're doing appearances and speeches and all that stuff, jumping in your bus and then heading straight out to another one without any time in between. Very little time to actually rest. No days off. You're on TV all the time, stuff like that. So it's not like the woman was incapable of working hard. And the fact that she's done it for 50 years, possibly longer. I don't think she was in the Senate for 50 years, but I think she was a state senator in California, or mayor or something like that. I don't know. I could look it up, but I'm not going to. But I know that she's been in the Senate for literally decades at this point. So the fact that it's commendable that somebody can do that for 50 years like that. But it kind of hits that point, just like with anything, that, maybe you shouldn't work until you die. Right? And this is the kind of thing, like, myself personally, I don't really understand this. Like, Dianne Feinstein was a multimillionaire, in no small part due to her position in the Senate, right? Like I've said before, senators basically can get away with insider trading. They can get away with stuff like that, where you and I, if we were to do what they do and use our knowledge of upcoming legislation in order to invest and beat the market, we would go to prison. That's the very definition of insider trading. For some reason, senators and House reps, they don't get held responsible for that. Nancy Pelosi is a very good example of somebody who's used their position to personally enrich themselves a lot. And, my politics, I'm not a Republican. I'm a progressive Democrat, but you have to call these things out where they lie. There's a lot of corruption on the Democratic side as well, especially when it comes to stuff like this. This is a prime example of corruption that crosses party lines, where a senator or a House rep or a government official of some type uses their advanced knowledge of government contracts, of government spending, They know which companies are going to be getting contracts, that kind of thing. They know which industries are about to be getting bailouts. They know when like which companies are going to be getting tax breaks, stuff like that. And then suddenly their personal stock portfolios seem to double or triple in value. How does that stuff happen? It's illegal. And Dianne Feinstein is not innocent of that at all. So it kind of gets me that somebody who's made millions upon millions of dollars would want to work until they're 90 years old. I mean, you would think after a certain point, you'd be like, oh, I've got enough money. I'm just going to like relax. And especially if you're rich, it's one thing if you're not rich and you're 70 and you have to work to survive. That's one thing. It's another thing if you're like super rich, like these people are, or like say Donald Trump is or something like that. Why the hell would you want to work when you're 70, 80, 90 years old? I mean, I guess at a certain point, that's just all there is for you. And that's just what your life is about or something. I could understand that. My answer to that is find something else for your life to be about. But anyway, so I don't understand, why. So there is a lot of criticism, and I think valid criticism, of Dianne Feinstein, of the fact that she hung on until the bitter end. 90 years old, doing a high-stress, high-impact job like that. There's something to be said as to maybe that shouldn't be allowed. Now, here's the thing, right? Because that reeks of ageism. And in some sense, yes, that's true. It is ageism. To say what I just said is ageism, right? We should not ever force anyone to retire if they don't want to, right? The only thing that we should do is maybe if your job is a high impact job that your job performance can affect the lives of other people the same way that her job was, maybe there should be an upper limit. Nobody would disagree, I think, that you don't want someone like, say, for example, who's 90 years old to be an airline pilot. For example, why? Because when you're 90 years old, no matter how sharp you are, no matter how sharp your brain still is, there's certain physical things that mess you up. Your reaction time isn't as good as it used to be. That's just what happens when you get old. You're not able to react as fast. Your stamina is way lower. When you're 90 years old, you have to take I mean, shit, I'm like in my 40s and like I have to take a fucking nap sometimes during the middle of the day. I can only imagine when it's 90, like you probably wake up and want to take a nap already. You probably go to sleep at like 6 p.m., right? I mean, no, it's exhausting. Just being the older you get, the harder these things become. It's exhausting. And yeah, okay, you're always going to have examples of people who are super tough and resilient all the way up into their 80s or whatever. Everybody's got that story of their grandfather who, like, my grandpa was super, he was like he had the body of a 30-year-old, even though he was 85, and he'd go out into the snow, and he wouldn't even wear shoes, and he'd be chopping wood for 17 hours. Shit like that. Okay, yeah, okay, whatever, all right. We're talking about the average ordinary person. When you get older, you just, you get a little loopy, even if you don't have dementia, which Dianne Feinstein clearly did. But even if you don't have dementia, your brain gets a little loopy when you get old. That's just a natural thing. Your cognitive ability declines naturally the older you get. You lose brain cells, just as part of your normal, ordinary life. Well, eventually when you hit like 95, 80, 95 years old, shit like that, that stuff starts taking a toll on you and you end up slowing down. And so maybe you shouldn't have a job where if you screw up, it can ruin people's lives. And I really think being a senator is one of those jobs, right? Case in point, for the last couple of years, since 2020, she has been absent multiple times, which has the biggest impact so far is that a lot of the judges have not been confirmed yet. Oh, wow, I just noticed this guy only has 3 fingers. Oh, well, this dude back here is like a mutant. He's only got 4 fingers on each hand. Anyway, I'm not gonna redraw that. Fucking, I'm just gonna leave it. Like, what's the one thing that Donald Trump actually accomplished? Right, is that he managed to pack the courts. Right, he managed to confirm like hundreds and hundreds of judges, federal judges, and that's basically led to lots of decisions around the country which favor Republicans. I mean, everything from the Supreme Court, we have Roe v. Wade, as we obviously are a real famous example from the Supreme Court, but also all of the other different levels, the appellate and a bunch of other courts. They're all basically stacked in the Republicans' favor. So every one of those courts has the ability to affect law. And this is how, this is one of the ways in which the Republicans are kind of enacting their agenda around the country, right? Well, a lot of those judgeships are up for to be appointed again, and there has to be a vote in the Senate in order to confirm judges. And if she's out, since there's only the Senate is basically very, very narrowly controlled by the Democrats by like 1 seat. So if she's out, then they can't get any judges confirmed. So she's been out like a record number of times over the last year, 2 years or so. Why? Because she's fucking 90 years old, right? And someone who's 90 years old is going to be out all the time because they're old and they're sick. She's going to the hospital every other week or whatever, and work's not getting done. And so that's like holding stuff back. And that's like one of the first sort of big, easily recognizable consequences of having her in the Senate. And I'm not just making this shit up, right? She easily would get confused. Here's an example I want to show you guys. This is an article from last July, July of 2023. Let's turn on our window here and make this thing bigger. This is from CNN. Feinstein gets confused in Senate appropriations hearing and has to be prodded to vote. Right. So this is about 4 months ago or so. Senator Dianne Feinstein had to be corrected and told to vote during a Senate Appropriations Committee hearing on Thursday. The California Democrat, who has been in frail health following a shingles diagnosis in the spring, has appeared confused and at times since her return to the Capitol. That's another thing. When you get super old like that, diseases which you could shrug off when you're 20, 30, or even 40 years old are potentially fatal. Shingles, she could have died from that. And that's just what happens when you get old. You become older and frail. Your immune system isn't what it used to be, stuff like that. Your constitution isn't as strong as it used to be. And that's a natural thing. And that's not any fault with her. That's just what happens when you get old. So it's like, that's another reason why you should retire when you get this damn old. Anyway, skipping down here, they actually wrote it out here. During Thursday's hearing, Feinstein was meant to cast her vote on the defense appropriations bill, requiring her to say aye or nay. When her name was called, she didn't answer. Democratic Senator Patty Murray of Washington State tried to prompt her. "Say aye," she said, repeating herself 3 times to Feinstein. Feinstein then started to read from prepared remarks and was interrupted by an aide whispering in her ear. "Yeah," Murray said once again, "say aye." "Okay, just," Feinstein replied. "Aye," Murray repeated once again. Then Feinstein sat back in her chair. "Aye," she said, casting her vote. See? Now, here's the thing, right? That little altercation there, maybe she really wanted to vote yes. But who's the person actually casting the vote here? Was it Feinstein? Or was it this other senator here telling her how to vote? And that's the thing. That's the other thing that I have a problem with this. It's like when you're that old and you obviously have some cognitive issues, whether it's full-blown dementia or whatever. Like, does she even know what she's doing? If she's sitting there in the room, they ask her to vote, she's not voting, and then she starts to read some shit. Does she understand even what she's voting for? Is it even morally right for someone to prod her to do it I don't think so. I think at that point, so here's the thing, right? Representative democracy, it's supposed to be that person that we elected making the decisions. We didn't elect this other guy here, whoever this fucking person is, Patty Murray of Washington State. Well, the people of California did not vote for Patty Murray of Washington State to vote in their behalf. They didn't vote for her. They voted for Dianne Feinstein. Dianne Feinstein is the one that should be making the goddamn vote, not being prodded by this other senator from some other state. That's what representative democracy actually is. So if she can't do the job, then she shouldn't be there. And it's got nothing to do with how old she is. It has to do with ability. And that's the thing. That's where I think a lot of people get afraid because the argument is ageist. Don't get me wrong. It's what I just said is absolutely ageist. And if you're pissed off at me because what I said is ageist, you're correct. But at the same time, it's necessary. It's necessary because she shouldn't be there if she can't do the job. Because we voted for her to do this job, right? I mean, I'm from California. This is my senator. Well, she's dead, but she was my senator. And you know what? I voted for her in the past because I'd rather have her there than some fucking greedy-ass Republican, right? But that's the whole point. Is that, well, she can't do it. So if you can't do it, why are you there? If you're 90 years old and you're sharp as a tack and you're capable of understanding what you're doing and you know, you were able to, and she was able to answer that question, right? If she was 90 years old, but still able to like read everything and know what's going on and not, you know, didn't have any of these problems and knew what she was voting on, shit like that, then there's absolutely no problem, in my opinion, with her staying. She could be 120. Is she capable of doing the job? And I guess that's the answer. She should have retired, seriously, 10 years ago. I mean, 70, 80 years old. I mean, come on. Nobody can be expected to work up until they're fucking 80 for crying out loud. The other thing I want to comment on this here is that all of these people are old. Let's turn this thing off. The majority of senators are older than 65 years right now. 54 senators. There's 100 senators. 54 of them are older than 65. Dianne Feinstein, she was the oldest. But the second oldest is Chuck Grassley. He's 89. Then Mitch McConnell, 81. We've seen Mitch McConnell actually have some cognitive issues recently, too. Freezing up and stuff like that and having to be prodded at speeches and things like that. So far, I haven't seen any reports of him not being able to, like, vote or whatever correctly. But still, there's been a couple of news stories about him, like, freezing up at speeches and having to be, like, taken away. That kind of thing. Doesn't look good. Bernie Sanders is 81. That's the exact same age as Mitch McConnell. Ben Cardin from Maryland, Democrat from Maryland, is 79. And James Jim Risch from Idaho, Republican from Idaho, is 79. Those are the oldest, like, five, right? The oldest House reps, the five oldest House reps are Grace Napolitano. Napolitano is 86 from California. Bill Parshall, Democrat from New Jersey, 86. Hal Rogers, Republican from Kentucky, 85. Maxine Waters, Democrat from California, is 84. Maxine Waters is awesome. I love her. And Steny Hoyer, 83, from Maryland. Now, the thing is, I mean, are all of these people too old to work? Like, I don't think so. Have you heard anything about Maxine Waters, for example, having dementia, needing help voting and stuff like that, not knowing where she is? No, haven't heard anything like that. For all we know, they're sharp as a tack and spry as a ninja for each of these people. For all I know, fucking, Grace Napolitano, like, does MMA and shit on the weekends or whatever, dresses up like Batman and goes out and fights crime. I have no fucking clue about any of that stuff. Should we force these people to retire just because they're in their 80s? I don't think so. I think it needs, but I do think that we need to have a serious discussion about politicians and their mental state. Especially when it comes to senators, especially when it comes to president. Remember, right now, Joe Biden is 80 years old. He is currently the oldest, like, president ever. There's never been a president who was 80 years old. The second oldest was Ronald Reagan, who was... Actually, no, Reagan was 69 when he was elected. And when he left office, Reagan, he was 77. So, yeah, Biden is the oldest. Donald Trump is only 3 years younger than Biden. So he's 77. So everybody's saying all this shit like, oh, Biden is like... You know, Biden is got one foot in the grave and all this other crap, and he doesn't know what's going on, and he's got a brain full of caterpillars, that kind of thing. Trump is not that far behind, and there's plenty of video of Donald Trump going off on weird tangents, mislabeling things, not knowing where the hell he is, mispronouncing stuff. He, for example, blamed Jeb Bush for getting us involved in Iraq and Afghanistan when it was George Bush, for example. He said that Joe Biden's gonna get us into World War II. I think he meant World War III. Shit like that. And that's the thing. It's like, okay, did he just misspeak? Is this evidence of actual cognitive issues? I mean, all you have to do is listen to Donald Trump talk for 5 seconds to know that he's got some marbles rattling around upstairs. That the man isn't completely all the way there, and probably never has been for a long time. I mean, that's what, like, a fucking lifetime of Diet Coke and chicken McNuggets will do to your brain. Right? Let's not forget, Donald Trump fucking eats junk food every fucking day, doesn't exercise at all. Donald Trump believes that you have a limited amount of quote-unquote energy, whatever the fuck that means, and if you use it up through exercising, then you'll, like, die. That's an actual direct, like, that's like an actual thing that he said. That's not fake news or anything like that. Like, he actually said that shit. He said that him waving around his arms and crap when he speaks is like exercise. So Donald Trump is not that far behind. I mean, and then when you talk about Biden obviously has some cognitive issues. He's got, you know, but this is shit that happens when you're fucking 80 years old. He's obviously got some cognitive issues. He's obviously old. He's getting a little feeble out there. He's not as young. So, you know, he falls over, stuff like that. And that's just what fucking happens. And it's like, well, we should have a very serious discussion about an upper age limit for these jobs, for the presidency, especially the presidency. I mean, I would say 75 max would be like the age that you get voted, because then when you leave, if you have a 2-term thing, you know, maybe even 70, right? Or 72 should be the upper limit of when you're like first elected, because if you have 8 years, then you'll be 80 when you leave. We should really think about that, because it can be dangerous for us, for the entire country, to have a president who's like 80, 82, 83, 84, and is just not physically capable of keeping up with the demanding job. What happens if there's a 9/11 type event when, let's just say both, because both these men are old men, so either one of them, it doesn't really matter. Biden or Trump. Imagine it doesn't matter which one of them is in office, and, you know, it just happens to be fucking nap time or whatever. The president is a little loopy. They wake him up and shit. Mr. President, fucking Trade Center's under attack. You want that person making decisions? Does the vice president step in that case? You know, what happens when, you know, the president is like in the hospital again for like the 5th time or whatever, because he's on the verge of fucking, you know, he's got one foot in the grave, that kind of thing. No, it's dangerous. That's the problem. And is what I'm saying ageist? Yes. Yes, it is ageist. It's absolutely fucking ageist, but it's true. I mean, these are the kinds of things we should be thinking about. And just, I mean, besides the other criticism that it's like, well, they're super old and they're out of touch with the country and all that other crap. Yeah, whatever. I mean, yes, okay, that's true. They're out of touch. Maybe we don't want somebody who's like our great grandfather and shit in charge of everything, whatever. I'm not so concerned about that as much as I'm concerned about things going wrong when we need somebody there and then the president's not there because of age-related issues. And if you think that can't happen, it definitely can. This is why you want someone who's not vulnerable to shit like that. This is why it's a valid criticism when somebody says he's too old to be president. That is a valid criticism. And, I mean, unfortunately, it looks like this is our choice. This is what's going to be our choice. We've either got an 80-year-old man or we've got a fucking 77-year-old man who to be the next president. And Trump will be 78 by the time, if he gets reelected, he will be 78 when he takes office. That means when he leaves office for a second term, God willing that he doesn't, God willing he fucking loses. But if there's, a nightmare scenario and Trump gets a second term, he's going to be 83 by the time he leaves. Donald Trump at 83, God help us all. Right? Biden will be, I highly doubt, if Biden gets a second term, he's probably going to die during his second term. Keep that in mind. So if you're voting for Biden, you're going to be voting for Kamala Harris. That's who you're really voting for. So do you want Kamala Harris to be president? I don't know. I guess it's better than Trump, I could say that. I'd rather have like the guy mopping the floor in the White House be the president than Donald Trump. I can say that. So I don't know. She'll be younger. Won't be taking as many naps and shit. You could say that. I don't know. Kamala Harris is a whole nother can of worms, but anyway, so I think we need to have these discussions, man. There really should be some kind of test. I think at the very least, you could say an official, sort of government doctor kind of thing, giving them a test in order for them to qualify to run. I don't think that's wrong. I don't think that's too ageist of a thing to ask. To require that the president not have dementia before they take control of the country and have their finger on the nuclear football and shit. I don't think that's that bad of a thing to say. So anyway, Dianne Feinstein, rest in peace. There's a lot of people that criticize her for lots of things, but she definitely has left her mark on the nation and will be going down in the history books. Hello folks, if you like what I do and you want to support the channel, please consider buying something from my Etsy shop, supporting me on Patreon, liking and subscribing, and checking me out across my social media links listed below. Thank you all so much, and see you next time.